The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. Tonight, we are joined by the man who has universally been deemed my audience's favorite show. And he happens to be not simply a rabbi, but with respect to the topic that he plans on covering tonight, this is my father, real life dad. People call him Great Lawgic. And he has a doctorate in medieval Christian Muslim relations. He's been teaching in colleges since I was in short pants, which everyone knows that predates Moses practically. And he's been giving lectures across the globe, visiting in the Middle East, speaks Arabic, and he pretty much is the one who told me everything that I know about the Middle East, as well as thousands of students across the globe. Everyone seems to love having here. So I welcome back to this show my favorite guest, and apparently, based on polling and statistics, yours as well, my dad, Rabbi Dr. Yaakov Tzvi Neerman, a.k.a. Great Lawgic. Welcome back, Daddy.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
And before he begins, I'm going to say this because the one thing I know I'm going to get criticized. I get criticized every time my father appears is that I talk too much. I'm going to do everything I can to talk for less than 15% of the time and just leave it for you, Dad.
All right. Well, it's fine. I mean, if you have questions, please voice them. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, please voice them as well. I'm going to start with something that I think will surprise most people. Why can we say that October 7th, the Hamas attack on southern Israel, on number of settlements there in Israel proper, not over the Green Line, which is in the eyes of the UN disputed, in the eyes of many not. But in any event, the attack, why could we say that attack was good, G-O-O-D, for Israel? I'm going to talk about this, but before I do, I want to set the stage. What the Middle East is about, what's going on there. And a lot of people are really not familiar with much of what I'm going to say. In fact, circa 1970, and I know that is already now 54 years ago, but circa 1970, in Western Europe, certainly I know in America because they did a survey, the only people that most Americans had heard of. Now, it's not true today with all the Muslims that I hear, but that most Americans had heard of were Muhammad and Salahuddin or Saladin. And that was because Saladin is in the book The Talisman by Sir Walter Scott. In those days, people used to read these kind of books. So that's why they had heard of them. And I still remember I had a strange incident. I don't like lying, and I was in a cab with some 3 Arabs in the back and another one driving when I was in Egypt. And I was speaking to them, of course, in their language and with a classical accent, not the way they talk exactly. There are 350 some odd dialects of Arabic. Incidentally, Palestinian Arabic in the eyes of the other Arabs, not only the Arabic, but the Palestinians, they're not too fond of them, bluntly. We can get into that more if you're interested.
Who's not too fond of them?
But the bottom line...
Who's not too fond of them, Dad?
Most of the Arabs.
Are not too
They're
fond
not going to tell you this, but they're not.
They're not fond of the Palestinians.
Right, the Palestinians, right. There's some, I say, 350 dialects of Arabic, and I don't speak Egyptian Arabic with an Egyptian accent, but they understand. And after I spoke to them for a few minutes in this cab, we're passing through the tannery, the slums of Alexandria, and the fellow looks at me and he says, "Oh, my brother," and he slaps me on the back. This is the driver, 3 more in the back. you're a Muslim. So I'm saying in Jewish law now, what do I do? Can I lie? Whatever. So all of a sudden my Arabic evaporated and they decided I was a Roman Catholic. But in any event,
just want to ask you, why did they dislike the Palestinians?
Generally they don't respect them because they first of all, they don't like their Arabic. They're Arabic, and and you have to understand something else. They know there's no such thing as a Palestinian. The term Palestinian was invented around 1962. There are Syrians, there are Iraqis, there are Egyptians, there are Maghrebis, which is northwest Africa, what we call West Africa. And you have Persians, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit in a few minutes. And they're very different than Arabs. Very different.
Why weren't any Arabs called Palestinians before 1962?
Because the area was not called Palestine, except by the Turks at one point named it that. The Brits called it that. Why did the Brits call it that? Because that name was the old name given by Hadrian after he destroyed a Jewish revolt in 135-36 of the Common Era or the Christian era.
But what did Muslims call it? What did Muslims call it? What did Muslims call it? They called Israel Syria?
Yeah.
They called the area that was known as Palestine Syria.
Later on, the Turks took on the name the Vialet, which is the Turkish term for a zone and a province. They took that name. They called it the Vialet of Philistin or Pilastin because they have a P.
I never heard this before, and this is really important. In 1950, when Nakba happened, right? So they felt they were invading what they would have called Syria, not Palestine.
But they knew it was. They knew it. Then it was being called Palestine.
But they didn't call themselves any Arabs living in Palestinian.
Well, the Arabs did not think of themselves as Palestinians. They thought themselves as Syrians or Egyptians or whatever else.
So some Arab who was living in Tel Aviv in 1945 would have called himself a Syrian.
I'm not saying 45, but in 1905, yes. In 1905.
Interesting.
This gentleman of yours, who maybe he's listening now, this friend of yours, who Hassan Shami. Shami means Syrian. That means probably he lived in what is today either part of Israel or whatever, that area, and he was given that name because his family came from Syria.
Yeah, but we don't know if that means it was in the area that is now Israel or
no,
it was actually Damascus.
The area was not. It was a backwater until the Jews. There's I'm having a mental block. The fellow runs the institute. I'll think of his name in 2 minutes. I can tell you what he wrote his book on, and I can't think of his name for a minute. But he had a whole published thing showing that Aqsa was a backwater, that the only reason the Arabs care about it is because they don't want the Jews there, because they do think of this whole area as the Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam. And so whatever works, because they won't want the area to be under the control of non-Muslims as a religious tenet among many of them. That leads me into something else that I do want to talk about. I was planning to talk about later, but I'll talk about it now. There's a gentleman who actually I heard from him, and I want to tell you about this fellow. This gentleman's name is Mordechai Kedar. Mordechai Kedar is an Israeli scholar of Arab culture. He's now in Bar Ilan University. He worked for the Shin Bet, which is the intelligence agency on Arab affairs, and he probably knows more about Palestinian Arabs or the Arabs of Palestine, whatever you want to call them, than anybody else outside of them, and maybe than most of them. Now, the reason I say this is what I'm going to quote later is his idea, and I'll explain later how that happened and why he thinks that way. But this Kedar was talking about this, and he himself says really that a lot of these things are invented, but you have to understand something else, and this is really what I really want to emphasize. we always talk about Iran, and by the way, it's Iran, not Iran. Iran is Iran away. All right. The word is Iran. Iran is not Arab. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think it's not Arab. Now, I'm gonna read to you a little clip. The greatest scholar of the 20th century of the Middle East, whom all of us have read. He put out some 30, 40 books, and even more importantly, because he was so good, he became the editor of a thing called the Encyclopedia of Islam, which sells for $500 a volume then, in the 70s and 80s. I don't even know today. Now, his name was, he just passed away 2 years ago at 101. His name was Bernard Lewis. Actually, he was Jewish. He was brilliant. And I'm going to read what he says about Iran and Islam and Arabs. Iran was indeed Islamized, but it was not Arabized. Persians remained Persians. Of course, they speak Farsi. And after an interval of silence, Iran reemerged as a separate, different, and distinctive element within Islam, eventually adding a new element even to Islam itself, culturally, politically, and most remarkable of all, even religiously. The Iranian contribution to this new Islamic civilization is of immense importance. The work of Iranians can be seen in every field of cultural endeavor, including Arabic poetry, to which the poets of Iranian origin composing their poems in Arabic made a very significant contribution. In a sense, Iranian Islam is a second advent of Islam itself, a new Islam sometimes referred to as Islami Ajam, meaning foreign or on the other side. It was this Persian Islam, rather than the original Arab Islam, that was brought to new areas and new peoples, to the Turks in Central Asia and then in the Middle East, and the country which came to be called Turkey, which of course the Ottoman Empire, and of course to India, where Islam in India. The Ottoman Turks brought a form of this Iranian civilization to the walls of Vienna in 1525, and I added 1683. That's when they came. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi, guys. Hi. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to read you one other short little thing. This man wrote what was called the Compendium of Arab Histories in Arab. And he wrote this around 1380. His dates are 1332 to 1406. His name is Ibn Khaldun, and he is considered to have been a genius. Some compare him. They say that there were three great medieval thinkers, and the three greatest medieval thinkers, one in Christianity, and that was St. Thomas Aquinas, known as the Good St. Thomas, about the Catholics. And that then, of course, this to us was Maimonides, and then Ibn Khaldun. So he's no small person. Okay. This is a quote translated from the Muqaddamah, the introduction to his history. It is a remarkable fact that with a few exceptions, most Muslim scholars in the intellectual sciences have been non-Arabs. Thus, the founders of grammar, and he gives the names, I'm going to leave the names out, three of them he mentions here, all of them were Persian descent, only they invented the rules of Arabic grammar. Great jurists were Persians. Only the Persians engaged the work of preserving knowledge and writing systematic scholarly works. Thus, the truth of the statement of the Prophet Muhammad becomes apparent. If learning was superseded in the highest parts of heaven, the Persians would attain it. That's what he said. Muhammad said that. All right. Then he goes on, the intellectual science, also the preserver of the Persians, left alone by the Arabs who did not cultivate them, as the case with all crafts. This situation continued in the cities as long as the Persians and Persian countries, Iraq, Khorasan, which is to the east towards what is today Iran, and that is then Transoxiana, which is modern Central Asia, as long as they retained their sedentary, meaning their indigenous, their local culture. So this is very, very important. It's also important to realize a few other things. Muhammad was from the settled parts of Arabia, but the mindset of most of those who were conquered by him and later reconquered, because many of them, the Bedouin have a concept. If I make a treaty with you, and either one of us goes bye-bye from the world, the treaty is abrogated. It's not a nation, it's a personal thing. The Bedouin and most of the Arabs had this outlook, even the what's called Khwada, the ones living in in settled areas, and such as Mecca, for example, or Medina was not known as Medina until Muhammad comes. In any event, the Arabs in those areas have the Bedouin mentality. Now, let me explain what the Bedouin mentality is. It's a very interesting mentality. A Bedouin mentality is hi, Pam. Hi. Nice. Thank you for joining. Okay. So now it's very interesting. Let's say that, all right, Sami, that's an Arab name. All right. Sami accidentally kills, I don't know, Isaac. Isaac, and that's the Arabic for Isaac. Right? Isaac in another tribe. Someone in Isaac's tribe is going to kill someone in Sami's tribe. This in English is called a blood feud. It's called a thar in Arabic. Now, these guys can go on for generations fighting each other until finally they make a reconciliation. That's called sulha. A sulha is a reconciliation, and it's a whole thing. They sacrifice. It's an animal. It's a whole formal business to do this. It's not just okay. Hey, yeah, let's forget about it. Oh no. It's a very formal thing. Now, and that, by the way, is today true among the Arabs, also the Bedouin Arabs today. This mentality of blood for blood, of taking this is something that is inherent in many of the Muslims today. Not all of them, but many of them. And it comes from what the Bedouin called asabiya, which is manly pride. The same way, for example, that many Muslims, I'm not saying all, but many, a large majority, if their daughter, we say, is with someone to be with intimately, both he and, unless she's raped, she should be taken out. These are the kinds of, because why? It's an insult to the family. This is very important to understand. This is the mentality generally. So when we see, and this has been reported now the past week, little children coming over and actually shooting at Israeli soldiers, it's because they've been told that they have an imperative to stop these evil people who have raped and hurt Islamic children and Islamic women more even. This is very, very important. I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you another cute story. I told this story privately many times to students. In 1970, 69, there was one professor. I don't want to say where I did this because I don't want to be able to know who the professor was. The professor was the son-in-law of a very famous Arab historian. He was not an Arab, but he spoke Arabic beautifully. This fellow didn't want me to get a doctorate in Islam. He really didn't want me to do it because he knew I was religious and he figured I'll be anti-Arab, and he doesn't want someone knowing enough, to counter what's going on. And that was the beginning of the period, even before the Arabs in 73, the Saudis got a fortune in money and they started setting up chairs of Islamic history and of Middle Eastern history in universities around the country, which is one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons why the university is so anti-Israel. But in any event, so this fellow gave me a hard time on the writtens, and the rest of there's a whole gang of professors. They said they took him off. But then they told me, well, in the oral, he's got to come in. So I said, oh, yeah. I said, don't worry about it. He's going to come in. I was really worried that he's going to try to torpedo me. So he comes in, and the exam's 2 hours long. He comes in after a half hour. He sits down opposite me at this big oblong table, and there's like 4 or 5 professors sitting on the sides. He sits there for 10 minutes, and then it goes, I have to ask Mr. Neiman one question before I leave. So I thought to myself, oh, God in heaven, what's he going to do? I'm sitting there. I was really afraid. So he goes, I want the most recent book on commerce in the Middle Ages, the Levant, actually, in the Middle Ages. And this exam was the Middle East from 1050 to 1250. It has to stick within that framework. So I want the most recent one. So I go, well, I mean, I know he doesn't like Jews and Israelis, and Shlomo Dov Goitein was an Israeli scholar. He had fled Germany. He was a brilliant man. And he opened up Geniza documents, which were primary sources in Cairo, and he was a super person. I had the privilege of meeting him a few years after this. And so I named the book. So he says, name another one. So I named another one in 1950. Then he goes, DAMN it, man. Don't you know the classic in the field? So I looked at him, and this is how I responded, the tone of voice. Why, Professor so-and-so, you don't mean the book that was first published in German in 1886 and then translated in French into French in 1923? He just named the book. So I named the book in German and then in French, and title, the author, and then the translator and the French title. I'd read it in French. So he goes, that's what I wanted to hear. So all the other professors are on swivel chairs. So they swing the chairs and they look at him. Are you crazy? You said the most recent book. So I say the good Lord upstairs messed him up, so he had to pass me. Otherwise, he'd look like a total idiot if he didn't pass me. So thank God for that. I say that. Whenever I tell this story, I say that. The good Lord took care of me over there in that situation. And anyway, coming back. Now, in order to understand Iran and the proxies, and there really are proxies, because Iran doesn't want to lose its soldiers to Israel if it can.
By proxies, you mean that Iran uses the Palestinians as their proxies?
Well, that's not only the Palestinians. They're using a number of them. They're using the Houthis also. Mm-hmm. They're trying to use those in Lebanon. They're using Syrians. Mm-hmm. They'll use anybody that they can get. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to again explain something else. If you want, I'll get into this. It will take 5-10 minutes to fully explain it. In Islam, this is a bad comparison. We know Roman Catholics and we know the Protestant, either Protestant Reformation, or if you're Roman Catholic, the Protestant revolt from the Holy Mother Church. Depends on your point of view. But the bottom line is that there are about 20% of Muslims are Shia Muslims, or Shiites in English. Now, the Shia Muslims, these Muslims, have a very different attitude toward a lot of things than do the Sunnah or the so-called Orthodox Muslims. And the Shia, certainly the Persian Shia, and the nexus, the main point or part of the Shia movement is in Persia. They, even though it started in Iraq, in terms of numbers, it's in Persia. They look down on the Orthodox or Sunnis. So now we have the Persians, all right, the mullahs. It's not most of the Persians. By the way, I think most of the Persians would love to get rid of them, but that's another issue. The mullahs, they certainly look down on the Sunni, and they doubly look down on the Arabs. So these guys have two strikes. So I created a scale when I explained this. I did this after thinking about this for a while. I created a scale. And the scale, I call this the hate scale. Okay. How much do you hate somebody? Now, in the hate scale, 10 means you really, really hate them. Okay. 10 is the most. So now we're going to do Iran's hate scale. Okay. Number 1, Israel. I should say number 10. It's number 10 on the hate scale. Why? First of all, they're infidels. They don't accept Muhammad. And second, and they're Jews. And third of all, they're in occupying part of the House of Islam, the Darul Islam. So that's number 1. Now, who's next? Now, again, these numbers are arbitrary, okay? I would say on the hate scale, meaning it's negative, Hamas. Hamas, I would say, is 7 to 8. All right, 7 to 8. Hamas is not loved. They want them to die to destroy Israel. I think it's wonderful if they can die destroying Israel because they want to destroy Israel. Now, lower on the hate scale, because they're Shia, are Hezbollah, which means party of God. Hizb in Arabic is a party, like political party. Right. Hezbollah is the party of God. So these guys are Shia. So there's a greater affinity from the point of view of the Iranians for Hezbollah than there is for Hamas. But, of course, they're still Arab, and the Persians don't love, or Iranians don't love the Arabs. Now, just because I could see a question coming up here later, and maybe this will give you a clue on how to refer to this. Now let's pretend for a minute we're now going to look at the Saudi. And by the way, the Arabs all call, they don't call it Saudi Arabia, they just call it Saudi because they all know it's Arabia. Anyway, the Saudis, okay, now their hate scale. Now, and this will explain why they're negotiating with Israel, which is one of the reasons, by the way, some people say Hamas attacked, but it's lesser. There's another reason, a bigger reason, which I'm going to give you later. Okay, so now, on the Saudi scale, Iran is number 10. They're scared of Iran because they know how much Iran hates Arabs. Here in America, people don't get all this, but they know it. Next on the Saudi hate scale is Hezbollah because they're Shia. Maybe some of you remember there was war between Iran and Iraq, was Shia, although there are plenty of Shia in Iraq too. Next, okay, is Israel. They don't like Israel so much. Of course not. But they can use Israel. They'll make a treaty with Israel to build up, to protect them from Iran anytime that they can get away with it. It's got to be done with probity, with, very carefully set out properly, because they're so Arabs. And then they have Hamas. Hamas they like, all right, a little bit. But they're Palestinians, so they only like them a little bit. They don't respect them. Not that the Saudis or those guys respect people anyway. I remember when I was in Egypt, I didn't know. There was a group of 20 professors. And, of course, I stood out from them because I brought 200 pounds of food with me, kosher food. So what happened was that they said they're going to Farouk's palace. And I thought to myself, oh, this would be an interesting place to see. That Farouk was the king that was ousted of Egypt. So okay. So I get in a cab. That was another one. Oh, yeah. And I get in the cab. So with the cab driver and I are having this conversation, and we're talking about Sadat. Sadat was then in power as far as assassination, 6 years before his assassination. So he goes, Sadat, like this. And then I go, Nasser. See, Nasser, long live, he's dead, but he goes, Yahya, long live Nasser. And we're driving through a narrow street. There's only room for one car, the cab, and he's taking his hands off the wheel. He's going, bomb, 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 bomb on the hill. And I thought to myself, all we need is an accident here. That's what I'm thinking. Anyway, so we go to Farouk's palace, and I see right away that it's a gambling joint, which is not my cup of tea. So what did I do? I walked around to try to talk to people, and I see someone dressed differently. And I knew that he was from one of the Arab states that's not Egypt at all, and with his money. So I did not know at that time that the Saudis don't dress this way. So I walked over to him and I asked him, and of course in Arabic, where are you from? Are you from Saudi? So he looks at me and goes, La, no. Then I said, then from where are you? So he goes like this, Bahrain. And then he got up and walked away as if to say, who are you? Okay, but I found out and I learned something. So it was good. But the bottom line is that this is the attitude. These guys don't love each other. But when it comes to a common cause, they will help. Or at least they'll give pro forma help. The same way that Iran doesn't like Hamas, but they can't. Hamas is a proxy. They want the other proxies to feel that they support their proxies. That's why they had the Houthis shooting missiles. I still don't understand why our beloved president does not order us to blow the Houthis out into the stratosphere, which we could easily do without much trouble, and no one's going to say boo about it. It's not like attacking Iran directly, but it really would weaken Iran, and it would be very smart to do. Although I have a theory that a former president whom he is very close to is calling the shots, and that gentleman, when he had an opportunity to take down the government of Iran during his time in office, he didn't do it.
I'll tell you, Dad, sir, I personally, I don't want America getting involved in this war.
I understand that's not involved. Knocking out the Houthi would not be involved.
What I'm saying is if Israel's going to do that, that's fine. Let Israel do it.
Israel doesn't have warships down there to do it though at the moment.
Right.
But anyway,
I'll tell you, I personally, I don't want to see any sort of involvement.
We're already involved. They already attacked the ship. There would have been damage and guys killed, except the ship there defended itself admirably, and they were all given medals. An admiral landed on the ship and gave them medals. I forget the name of the ship, but I read this either today or last night.
I'm simply saying the less engagement America has in the Middle East,
I
the happier I am.
I do understand that. All right. So anyway, so now we have the proxy. Before I get into the whole thing with the war, I'm going to mention something else. That a lot of people.
I just want to before you do that, I just want to get to a couple of things. So Breck Nichols sent a Rumble Ramp before saying, "So excited to see Great Lawgic again. These rare episodes are such a treat for me. Thank you so much." I want to just drop.
Thank you.
Drop for that. I appreciate you, Breck Nichols. Marcel asked this question here, which is, I'm a Roman Catholic and the church has gone through its reforms over the last 2,000 years. Has Islam really had a reformation, or would still be, or is still has the church in the, it used to be seen as the church in the Dark Ages? So wondering about your thoughts.
Question. Okay. Nothing has happened since the 7th century equivalent to what happened in the 16th century in Europe. All right? That's the best way to put it. In other words, in the 16th century, you had the creation of, first of all, Lutheranism, then Calvinism, which has manifestations in the Baptists, the Presbyterians, and numerous others. And then the Anglican Church, all of which are Reformed churches for various reasons. In the case of the English Church, of course, it was because Henry wanted a legitimate male heir, and they didn't have amniocentesis in those days. In any event, I hope no Anglican gets upset at me for this comment. In any event, but in Islam, the main break was in the 7th century, in the period. Muhammad dies in 632. So within 3 decades of Muhammad's death is what's called the first fitna, which could be called, the American or European historians call it civil war. The Arabs mean disturbance in Arabic. That was between Muhammad's son-in-law Ali and Muawiyah, who started the dynasty, which rules in Damascus from 660 to 750, 749, 750, depending how you look at it. Anyway, so
that leads to the split between the Shia and Sunni.
Yeah, that creates the Shia Islam, right?
And what is the Can you explain what the primary distinction is between philosophy of Shia versus philosophy of Sunni?
All right. Well, okay. Well, first of all, Shia believe that they reject all of the caliphs, certainly after Ali, and many even before, saying only Ali, who was the fourth caliph and the son-in-law Muhammad, is the rightful ruler of Islam, and that there were these imams that came out that somehow escaped the massacre in 680. It was a big massacre of Ali's son and his encampment. And somehow that was Karbala, that place. In fact, by the way, it's very interesting. That massacre, they reenact it. They take chains, the Shia, and beat themselves until they get blood or draw blood. On the 10th of Muharram, interestingly enough, that's the 10th day of the 7th month. Yeah, and that in order to commemorate the martyrdom of Hassan and Hussein. Hussein was killed that day. Hassan was poisoned by a wife. The Shiites say it was at the direction of the Sunnis. Historians are not in concurrence with that.
By the way, the reason my father said, interestingly, it's the 10th day of the 7th month is because that's when Jews observe Yom Kippur. So yeah. that's the point that he was. That's why he said it's interesting that they have their I guess atonement on this. They chose their day.
Now they say that's the day he was martyred. Now maybe they picked that day because of that. I can't answer.
Okay,
that's the day they say he was martyred.
Interesting.
I mean, I can describe the whole martyr.
Maybe it did. Maybe it was. Maybe it was. Maybe that happens to be the actual day. I don't know.
It was around then. Well, you have to understand something else. The Muslim calendar. Yeah, maybe I should explain this because a lot of people know Muslims and they may be wondering why Ramadan is not always the same time of year. Mm-hmm. The reason is very simple. It's because the Muslim calendar is lunar with no leap year. So it's 354 days long all the time. So it's very easy for me to follow it because although we have a leap year, we have a lunar calendar too, the Jewish calendar. So I know, for example, this year is a Jewish leap year. So in the past couple of years, it was during 1 month, and now it's going to be a month earlier on our calendar.
Just to clarify, when my father says a leap year, so on a lunar calendar, a leap year doesn't mean an extra day like we have in a solar calendar. It means an extra month. So instead of there being only 12 months, they'll count the 12th month twice and have a 13, literally an extra 29 days. So on the Jewish calendar, the way there's an effort that was put forward by rabbinic scholars nearly 2 millennia ago, where they set up the calendar. 358 CE. Yes. Okay, thank you, Dad. So that they instituted that there will be a 19-year cycle where during every 19-year cycle there will be 7 leap years, and in those 7 years, instead of being only 12 months, there'll be 13 months, and they'll count 29 days and year by year, so it'll move back compared to the solar calendar 11 days, and then jump forward 29 days and then back 11 days, 11 days,
7 times every 19 years. That's what it is.
Right.
7 times in 19 years. I mean, I can tell them the years, but it doesn't matter.
Right. So that's how the Jewish lunar calendar works. Mm-hmm. And that's designed to keep basically the holidays seasonal. So that Passover will always be in the spring and the high holidays will always be in the fall. That's not the way it works on the lunar calendar maintained by Muslims, where they don't have that extra month ever. It's always 354 days. So that means that every year they're falling short compared to the solar calendar by 11 and a quarter days.
But not in Iran. They have a leap year. I don't know how they do it, but they have a leap year.
Oh, interestingly. That's very interesting. So that's why Ramadan, if it comes out in the winter, in year 1, if you count basically 15 years later, it'll be coming out in the summer because it keeps moving up every year, 11 days earlier. So 15 years later, it's going to end up being in the middle of the summer if it's in the winter. In year 1, in year 16, it's going to be in the middle of the summer, and their cycle is not maintained according to the season at all. So let me get to a couple other questions here. So it's Brian Ungden. Thank you for that. Why did ISIS bomb the Iran memorial? That's what Karen Mannings is asking.
I don't know. I can give a guess, but I don't really know.
All right. Papa Lawgic, great Lawgic. The thing that has been bugging me is this. Whatever happened to the golden rule? My favorite, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Is that idea lost?
Not among us. Not among Jews.
Or amongst Christians, I think.
Right, and Christians too, I would think, yeah. But among the Muslims, I mean, I'll tell you, you can find, let me talk, what is the Quran? Let me talk about the Quran for 5 minutes. Quran are the utterances of Muhammad. What he said. What happened was, and this ultimately led to the assassination of the third caliph. What happened was, well, people, after Muhammad died in 632, people were walking around and they had heard Muhammad. Muhammad would fall on the ground and he would start to recite. And of course, Muslims will say Muhammad whenever they say his name, they say, "In peace of God upon him." There's a whole formula when you talk about him. And Western scholars have a different view. I don't really want to get into this because in public, I am very careful what I say because there was someone who made fun of Muhammad and he was assassinated. In any event, the bottom line is, though, that the Quran has in it what you could say all things to all people. I don't mean that negatively. I mean there are verses in the Quran that are very peaceful, that you should love people, that you should work together and cooperatively with people. And they're there. And good Lawgic knows, I have a cleaning lady. She's the sweetest thing in the world. She works here for 28 years or something.
A Muslim.
And she's a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
She's amazing. She's an amazing woman.
A wonderful lady. She works and we have a very good relationship. So that you can have that. Then you have the other side. And the opposite is the violent side. You could say it's that asabiya, mentioned manly pride, whatever it is. And you have also some very pungent, violent kind of things in the Quran. What you should do to the unbeliever, how you should take care of him, eliminate him, and so forth and so on. You have an expression of hell, which those who are not the believers will go to, which is extremely, there's a tree which will, the fruit of which they're forced to eat, and it burns out their innards. I mean, this stuff is heavy stuff. It's, by the way, the religion, I remember when I was teaching this years ago, I came up with the thought, the religion is very much, and actually someone else, very important person who died years ago, talked about this too. It's mostly it spreads in what he called the torrid zone, the hot area, because the negative images are hot, burning heat. The pleasant images are cool, verdant, green fields where it's beautiful, there's water, very calm, and everything else. That's heaven. So, in their imagery. So, and of course, that is very relevant to Arabs and to people living in, shall we say, between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Those are areas where it's hot all the time.
Right.
Yeah, and they look for cool.
Let me get one more question out at you over here from Moncton Training, who's asking, good evening, is it true that the Sunni and Shia disagree on the Muslim Messiah, Sunni needing a Khalifa, Shia needing the apocalypse? Also heard that there's a world where Israel and Islam can make peace, but Shia and Sunni never. So,
I'm not familiar with all of this. I would tell you this. The Shia do look for an apocalypse. That's, by the way, one of the reasons. The Shia also are willing to lie. They practice taqiyya, which is religious dissimulation. So anything they say about the nuclear stuff, forget about it. Whatever. I would never let them get nuclear weapons. You don't want them to have nuclear weapons. Because if they try to blow us up, they figure if we blow them up, they go to hell. When we get blown up back, we go to heaven. So forget about that. That's very, very dangerous if they should ever get this. A Messiah, all right. There is the idea of a caliph or a khalifa can bring ultimately the time when Islam will rule the world, which is the ultimate goal of many of the violent people. That they want.
Is that among Shia, Sunni, or both?
Everybody. Now, there are three. All right, jihad. Now, what does the word jihad mean? Okay, jihad literally means, people say, well, it's holy war, but it's not wrong, but that's what it means. It means to work hard. I got jihad. I got it. And the Muslim writers will tell you that the highest and hardest jihad is controlling yourself to behave properly, which is nicely.
Right, self-discipline.
Yeah, right. What we would call musr. Now, that's one thing. Next, then there is what we would call external jihad. And now there are levels of external jihad. If the Muslims are a small number, a very small number, so they should be nice and try to convert people in a positive way by being nice to people, to show them Islam is beautiful, which it has this, as I said before, 5 minutes ago. So that's one kind of jihad. Then when there are more Muslims, they should exert more pressure on people, which we're seeing in Europe in certain places, and which we also are seeing beginning in the United States here, because there are more and more of them here. And finally, when they're in a position to seize control, they should seize control. Whatever means, better by peaceful means, of course, but they want control. And they're willing to let Christians and Jews live now officially, live as subject peoples in a Muslim state. Historically, the Jews wore yellow and the Christians wore black markers, either a turban or a belt, a wide belt around. They wore clothing there was like a kaftan clothing, so they wore that kind of clothing, and that's right. They have to be done, and of course, in the Middle Ages, Muslims could ride on horses and on mules. A mule is a cross between a horse and a donkey. So mule is higher. When you're riding on a mule, you're sitting higher than on a donkey. Jews had to sit on donkeys and Christians on donkeys generally. Not always. There were times when it was very good for Jews. We had one particular Jew who was commanding an army in the 11th century in Spain. But when his son took over later, there was a riot and the son was murdered, and then the things fell apart for the Jews. In other words, the positions there were very flaky. That's the best way to put it. Extremely flaky. I do want to talk about, and I mention this because I think, I can't prove it, but I believe a lot of the Palestinians have been taught what I'm going to tell you. One of the things that most people do not know is there were Jews, you call them Arab Jews if you will, but there were Jews in the Arabian Peninsula for approximately 1,000 years before the advent of Islam. In fact, the Yemen, Himyar, they call it Yemen, was conquered by a Jewish group, and for 2-3 years there was a Jewish ruler there. And finally, he was overthrown by an invasion by Christians from Ethiopia, who were given money and equipment from the Byzantine Empire, which was Christian. But in Medina, now Medina was called Yathrib until Muhammad came. When Muhammad came, it was renamed Medinat Anwar or Medinat Anabiyah. Medinat Anwar, like the name Anwar Sadat. Anwar means lights, Lights. It's a plural of nur, meaning light. And Nabiya is Nabi, the prophet. All right, so it has those two names now. All right, so Muhammad came in there 622. When he comes in there, he starts visiting and interacting with the Jews, and he wants to convince the Jews to become Muslims. And he spends 2 years trying at this. He actually, according to some sources, went to their study halls where they were learning, adopted some of their customs into his new religion. For example, he had a revelation after he interacted with the Jews, no more pork. So whatever reason you want to put that, because a Muslim will say that was because God then told him that. All right. Now, after 2 years, when Muhammad could not convince the Jews to accept him, his attitude turns towards open hostility. Excuse me. There was the leader of there were 3 Jewish tribes. One of them was the Banu Nadir. Banu means children of. The Banu Nadir, and they produced dates. Dates, by the way, Middle Eastern dates are excellent. If you can afford them and find them, they're very healthy and excellent. So he had some of his friends murder the chief of the tribe and then said, kill every Jew you can. So these Jews put up quite a tumult, and they didn't destroy them yet. So he went to another tribe. There were 3 Jewish tribes. Now, I want to say one thing. One of the things here is very interesting about this. The 3 Jewish tribes, if they had united against Muhammad, there would be no Islam today. I'm telling you straight away. Now, of course, a Muslim will tell you that was God's will, and so will we. But the truth of the matter is, I'm just saying that if they united. Now, I mentioned this because one of the things that, quite interestingly, in the and now in what the soldiers found when they went in to Gaza, was that Israel they thought, because there were a lot of protests in Israel. I was in Israel for almost 2 months in the summer. And while I was there were times when I couldn't go where I wanted to go because the street was blocked by protesters who were bussed in by certain people. I'm not going to get into who. The bottom line of this is that Hamas read all of this and figured the Jews are divided. Now's the time to attack. They'll never come after us again because they can't, because they're so weak, because they're divided. And thank God they put aside all that and they came after them. Because if they don't destroy them, that sends a big message. It's a tough neighborhood, and you've got to make sure that everyone is afraid of you when you're Israel. Otherwise, you won't be Israel. You'll be overrun. And Nasrallah, that's the head of Hezbollah, yesterday alluded to that Israel's divided. So Israel cannot be divided. Okay, anyway, so he besieged another tribe. There were 3. I said, this is the one. The second one was the Banu Kainuka. And they were very good, but they were besieged. They ran out of food and water. And again, if the other tribes had come, the Jewish tribes had come to their assistance, it wouldn't have happened. But they didn't. They sat back because they had often quarreled with these guys. So why should we help them out? So Muhammad attacks them and it overcomes them. And there was a fellow who was a friend of his. His name was Abdullah ibn Ubay, and he prevents the massacre. And those Jews are exiled to the area near what is today the land of Israel, to Jordan, the desert side of the Jordan River. Now, next they attacked the Day tribe, the Banu Nadir, in 625, and they surrender, and they're also exiled, and they're exiled to the city of Khaybar. All right, and finally, the third tribe was called the Banu Qurayza. Now, Muhammad is going to attack them, and this time, and this is important, this time, this Abdullah ibn Ubay has died. So there's no one that he respects to intercede for them. They had about less or fewer than 500 soldiers or warriors. And Muhammad now, of course, has a majority of soldiers because the others are gone. He attacks with about 3,000. Numbers are round, and I don't trust numbers this time period. Anyway, so leader of those Jews advises people they should either convert to Islam or follow the Masada example and kill their women and children to prevent them being ravished and enslaved. And then the men should fight the Muslims to the death. But the people rejected him, and they offered to surrender and leave Medina. Muhammad rejects their surrender. He conquers the tribe, and this is what happens. The children are sold as slaves. The women were given to the victorious soldiers for the Muslims to use. That's a quote from one of the sources. And the men, except for 3, who agreed to convert to Islam, were decapitated in the marketplace. Roughly 600 to 900 men were killed. And there's one source that claims that the blood flooded the marketplace, but that's I don't believe that literally, but it means a lot of people were killed. Now, there's another very interesting little thing on this. Oh, thank you very much. My dear wife is bringing me a cup of coffee, which is very useful at this point. Thank you, dear. Okay, now, the head of this tribe, the last tribe, had a daughter named Zainab. Now, one of the things I always say when I teach history is it's not only what you tell, it's what you don't tell. Excuse me. Okay. There's an accusation, and I don't know if it's true or not. A lot of scholars say it isn't, and some of the Muslims say it is. Muhammad married the daughter of the chief of this tribe, who was executed by him. Her name was Zainab. Muslims claim that she poisoned Muhammad. Some of them do anyway. Now, I once saw a Muslim account saying the following: Muhammad married an orphan who was such an ingrate that she poisoned him. Now, I mentioned about blood for blood. I also mentioned who made her an orphan, ladies and gentlemen. Who made her the orphan? Again, you have half the story. You need the whole story. Okay, so now I'm going to get to what was the teaser, why it's a good thing. Why is the attack a good thing? We've been an hour, so now we can get to this. Okay. This Mordechai Kadar, who has contacts, remember he was in the intelligence department there, throughout the Arab world. And what I am telling you makes great sense. What he's saying, and I'm repeating, makes great sense. That Iran wanted or figured the only way to really destroy Israel is to get her from all sides without warning. Therefore, Hamas will attack in the south from Gaza. In the north, Hezbollah with their missiles, and we don't know they have a lot, will start attacking the same time and will cross, and they've made tunnels. We know that now. There will be an attack from the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. And I was told by some people in Israel last week that people in Netanya, now Netanya, if you know the geography, is roughly 11 miles from a big Arab city, Tulkarm. And people in Netanya were complaining that they heard noises under their floor. Many people thought it was nothing. Now that we know about the tunnels and the extent of the distance and length of these tunnels, I am sure they're going to look for tunnels leading from the Arab towns in the West Bank area into the Israel from 48 to see if they're trying to come in underneath there so they could attack from there, because that is another place from which they were supposed to attack Israel, according to the grand Iranian plan. Furthermore, the Syrians have been screaming they want the Golan back. The Syrians are going to attack on the Golan, try to cut off northern Israel and squash it between Hezbollah coming in from Lebanon and the Syrians from the north, while from the West Bank and Hamas, they're going to squash there. And they say they're going to hit Israel by surprise, and the Israelis won't know where to turn first. The army will not be mobilized, and they figure before it can be, they will overrun the country. That was supposedly the grand plan. Hamas spoiled it because Hamas, first of all, wants for the Arabs to get territory, and Hamas wants the glory of being the ones that initiated the conflict. And Hamas has prepped its people constantly. As I said, they're training children, and they have children. We know, for example, there were cases, 4 or 5 Israeli fathers who are in the army are not going home. They're going to 6 feet of earth because they didn't shoot little kids coming towards them who had guns. They didn't know the kids had the guns. All right? So if Israel shoots kids, there's a reason. And it isn't because they like to kill kids. But that was proven now. This past 2 weeks, this happened. So what I'm saying is, the bottom line is they wanted to attack. They do want to attack. And at this point, Israel is going to finish off within the next 2 months, or hopefully less, Gaza. And then they're going to turn on Hezbollah, because Hezbollah...
What does finishing off Gaza really mean, though? What does that mean?
It means that Hamas will be out of Gaza. Hamas will be out of it.
No, because I think some people might misinterpret that as them, like, basically killing everyone in Gaza. And that's
no, God forbid. No. But I will tell you this. I will tell you. It's very hard to distinguish. There were many people who supported Hamas because they were afraid of it. But there are many others who, when Hamas came in on October 7th, with all those hostages, were cheering and screaming and cursing the hostages and everything else. So it's very difficult to say who is a combatant and who is a non-combatant. You have women that are carrying supplies and messages and guns back and forth for Hamas, the same way the kids were. We do know that Hamas sent kids out to evaluate where troop movements of the Israeli army was, so then they know how to ambush them from the turrets.
Yeah, I want to show you.
I'm saying it's a problem. They're obviously not going to kill everybody.
I want to show you something which really, to me, this really underscores, and this was something shared by someone. It's a very strong, free Palestine, anti-Zionist guy who used to follow me, and he stopped after October 7th. He holds daily sessions about how terrible Israel and Zionists are. Named Suleiman Ahmed. He's a pretty large following on Twitter, and he and I we used to engage on Twitter frequently on the same side prior to October 7th, and now he decided to stop following me. And he shared this letter, which I think really underscores what you're describing here, as far as the problem in trying to figure out what to do with people who are not picking up guns, but very strongly. One would label this. Well, I'll let people decide for themselves how you label it.
I put my glasses on so I can read this. All right.
So he shared. I'll make it a little bigger here, so people
can.
So it says, breaking letter from Gazan civilian to Hamas. So this is a letter that was left behind by a Gazan civilian to Hamas. And he attaches a copy of the letter down here below, which is in Arabic. Which
let me see.
But he translates it. We'll assume for purposes of this discussion that his translation is accurate.
All right. Okay. I would assume so.
And this is what the letter purportedly says. My beloveds, men of God, we left our home knowing that it is safe as long as you are there. Thanks to you, we will return soon. The brown cupboard in the kitchen, we filled it with canned food for you. 1,000 health and happiness to your hearts. Enjoy them with good health. In the living room, there's a brown and beige sofa in the corner. Under the seat, there's a key to the bedroom. Just open it and you'll find money on the bed. If you need to spend it, do so happily. If the house gets destroyed, it's a small sacrifice, as the shoes on your feet are worth more than the house. But I just have one request. Take care of yourselves and stay safe. So that's a letter from a Gazan civilian. Now, when people, I saw this and I was just like, how are you supposed to how is Israel supposed to distinguish between, I mean, I guess if someone's holding a gun and someone else is not holding a gun, between what is, being labeled here a Gazan civilian and literally leaving money and whatever support they can for Hamas, and saying that the shoes on their feet are worth more than the house. Like there's an active love. And I don't know if this represents 5% of Gazan civilians or 90% of Gazan civilians. I have no idea.
I will tell you this, and this is true not only of Gaza, it's also true of the West Bank, and this is why you cannot have a totally independent area, the West Bank, united behind the PLO or the PA, because it's going to be the same problem you had in Gaza. Remember, Gaza was really independent. It was independent. Hamas was ruling Gaza. Hamas has a border. Gaza had a border with Egypt. People could come and go as they willed. Israel let in workers to work and paid them. By the way, now that's changing. The Arabs are going to really suffer because Israel is now importing Japanese and Chinese workers.
You're saying they're financially going to suffer, that they're basically importing other workers.
But anyway, let me go on with this.
Mm-hmm.
You want an explanation? It's a very simple explanation. And it shows the depth of the problem. If a 5-year-old boy, forget that, a 30-year-old guy, he was born in 1990. In 1990, the state of Israel was 40 years old. He heard from his grandfather and from his father and maybe from his great-grandfather that the Jews threw us out. The Jews stole our land. That is not true. But that's what grandparents said. That's what daddy said. And now he teaches it to his sons and daughters. And it goes on and on. It's very difficult. When I start most of my classes in the college, the first thing I say is, it's not what the truth is. It's what people believe the truth to be. And that leads them to behave a certain way. These people, many of them, believe that Israel stole the land. And again, we could get into a whole discussion on this, the birth of Israel and everything. It's not the case. But they believe it. They believe that Israel massacred Arabs. There was one incident where half a dozen Arabs, and even that, they were looking for people with guns when that happened. Maybe a dozen, not a half dozen, a few more than that. The Arabs massacred a lot more people than we massacred, even if we say we massacred. But the bottom line is, do you think they tell that to the kids? When the UN schools, the professor that tried to keep me from getting my PhD was on the committee working for the UN. He was reading my exams while he was flying to Paris to approve textbooks, a math book. This is not literal, but this is the idea. If a platoon of 10 Israeli soldiers is coming to rape our women, and brave Ahmed shoots 5 of the swine, how many are left to attack or plague us? Kid gets told this. Now you have someone like Yusuf, the Green Prince, who's the son of Hamas. There are a few who understand the truth. But when people are fed this consistently and constantly for 75 years, what do you think most of them are going to think?
Yeah.
It's a serious problem.
This is why I say, even in completely different realms, that like with respect to elections, I was like, it's not simply a matter of integrity, but it's transparency of integrity. Because if you have integrity, but people don't believe it, because you're not being transparent. So it doesn't even matter if you're having integrity, because there's still the same fighting that's going to happen because of the lack of transparency about the integrity.
Well, that's
And
all.
that's just, but my point is, as far as people knowing that what is actually, and understanding what's actually happening, rather than, being bought successful gaslighting propaganda that's just been taught to them by people in their environment. So
World War one of the causes of World War One was because of the defeat in the French in the Franco-Prussian War, 1871. The French Empire of Napoleon III is ended, and in their side, the Germans create the German Empire. And they crown him in the place where Louis XIV was sitting, hundreds of years earlier, 200 years earlier. So anyway, the French produced literature. The Last Lesson, where a teacher this is fiction. The kids all read it. Teacher gets up and he's crying. The Germans are taking over Alsace-Lorraine. Always remember you are French, and France will redeem you with her blood. That was one story. The other story, called Two Friends, they go fishing while Paris is under siege. And of course, the Germans come and they capture them. Again, it's fiction, we know you came. The officer replies says in perfect French. He says to them, well, I know you know the password through the French lines because you got out here. I'll be happy to let you go home to your wives and children. All you need do is give me the password. Now, this is French nationalists. They're not going to give them the password. So they line them up. The soldiers raise their rifles. They've caught the fish, by the way. And the soldiers raise their rifles, and they think of their wives who will be widows, and their children will be orphans, and the bullets rip their chests apart. And then the officer says to his men, gentlemen, light a fire. We have delicious fish for lunch. You think a French child is taught this? What do you think he's going to think of the Germans? This is the problem with this stuff. And they had the same thing with the Arabs. This is the Palestinian Arabs. And not only Arabs in Palestine, in a lot of places.
Let me get to a couple of chats here. Monk and Trang says, thank you, Great Lawgic. He was the one who asked you this question earlier. So he just said, thank you, Great Lawgic. Explanation of external jihad sounds very similar to Maoist war doctrine. Crusader Saracen says, Shalom Aleichem to Joe and Dr. Great Lawgic. Fun fact, the first recorded example of mooning was a Roman soldier mooning pilgrims at the Great Temple. And as Josephus says, spoke such words as one would expect in such a posture.
Okay.
Matthew Felty says, I'm a bit back catching up from calendar stuff at double speed. Is there any truth to the theories of the tribes campaigning in zodiac observance? How was the camp arranged? Oh, camping in zodiac observance. It's not zodiac observance. But there were, when they were traveling in the desert, if you're referring to the tribes traveling in the desert.
Yeah, the tribes in the desert. Right.
Right, so when they were traveling in the
it was not zodiac. No, it was not.
I don't. Yeah,
it was around the Levium and the Mishkan. It was around the Mishkan.
Right.
I'm sorry, around the
tabernacle. Right,
around the tabernacle.
So, so when they were traveling in the desert in the Sinai for 40 years, there was, they kept the tabernacle in the middle, and the tribe of there was 13 tribes actually. So the tribe of Levi was split into 3 separate families, camped around it, with Moses and his brother camped on the 4th side, and then they had the other 12 tribes were split into packs of 3 tribes around each on the north, south, east, and west side. So that is, but that's how it's recorded in Torah that they traveled, but not. There's no reference to the fact that there's any relationship between, one tribe and a particular zodiac symbol or anything of that nature. So, and Legal Vices, my brother says, I've been here for 30 seconds and I love your dad so much. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. All right. You want to get, so why don't we get back in, Dad?
Well, okay. Now, so the bottom line of it is, now I will tell you what Kadar suggests. And I have reservations about his suggestion, and that basically will do it, unless you want me to get into other stuff about the Shia and the Sunni and all that. But the bottom line is, he suggests the following. He suggests creating what he calls emirates, 8 small states around cities, which are independent, can decide on their own government, but that the Israelis have the right to come in and go, meaning the army, if as necessary. Now, I'm not at all sure that'll work, but that's what he suggests. That was his recommendation.
8 emirates?
Yeah, well, he calls them emirates. You can call them whatever you want. They're city-states. In other words, Jenin would be one, Nablus would be another one, Gaza would be one. You have there are other places that you could have. Ramallah would be one.
They would later be reclassified. The Free Palestine people would basically claim that those are 8 concentration camps. That's what they would say. And
probably, yeah, they would. I think so. I don't think it'll work.
I think that
they're saying Gaza's an open air prison. There's no prison. If it were a prison, they couldn't have armed themselves.
Yeah, I've got a handful of idiots referring to what's happening there as genocide. And,
yeah, no, more than a handful, unfortunately. A lot of people.
No, I meant even
use the term "stupid idiots" or "useful idiots."
Yeah,
they are. They're useful to these people that want to destroy Israel.
Yeah,
and ultimately want to destroy America and make it a Muslim state. A Muslim state. There are, by the way, in upstate New York, there's a town, I believe, and I don't know where it is, where Sharia law, local law, the local town, and they are the Sharia law. And there's a sign saying, when you come in, if you come into this town, dress modestly. It's not on the highway or anything. I've never seen it. Yeah, but I read it was up there somewhere.
I never talk about the whole Christian element regularly because I recognize that saying it sounds like I'm trying to motivate people to take sides and understand that and put them and paint them as if they're in the crosshairs, which is one of the reasons I never say. But Brigitte Gabriel is the one who said that there's a phrase that Muslims have, which is first comes Saturday, then comes Sunday, which is a reference to first the Jews and then Christians. So,
no, they want the world. There's no question about the world. Whether we be first or they be first, I mean, the Christians first. No, absolutely, they want the world.
I mean, and the other reason I don't think it's relevant is because I don't think they're ever going to get Saturday. So if first comes Saturday, in that case, and they're never going to get Saturday, well, they'll never get Sunday. So that's why I don't think it's really relevant. That's another.
Well, I'm not saying they wouldn't take Sunday first and then on Shabbos, but they're putting it.
Yeah, but it definitely seems as if Jews are far more directly in their crosshairs, which is why I don't like portraying it as that. I don't like portraying it as this is your fight too.
No, it's not. And Netanyahu said no. He said it's our fight, but we're fighting for you. That's how he put it.
Yeah. So, I would like to hear more about Shia and Sunni because to me, understanding more about Muslim mentality and the inner conflicts there is something that I feel as if I'm far too oblivious of that you can probably provide enlightenment on. So that's why I'm wondering if you could just sort of portray the distinction and which ones are. Do they each consider themselves to be above the other? What is the difference in philosophy?
Right. Each one considers himself to have the true revelation. There are some distinct differences. For example,
I just want to review. So the key differences between Shia. This all started just a mere few decades after Muhammad died, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And there's a split there between Shia and Sunni it's about whether or not they accept certain caliphates as being.
Well, it started whether you accept the caliphs, the first caliphs. Yeah, they all accept Ali.
So who's Ali? Who's Ali specifically? He's the son-in-law?
Specifically, right. So
he's a son-in-law of Muhammad?
Right, yeah. He married Fatima, Muhammad's daughter.
Okay.
And
did Muhammad have sons?
What?
Did Muhammad have any sons?
No.
He didn't have any sons.
No.
Okay.
He was this Muhammad. He was a cousin. He was the son of Abi Talib, I believe, who was Muhammad's uncle, Ali. Now, in fact, there was a dynasty that ruled Egypt from about 969 to 1171. Was overthrown by Saladin and his uncle, actually. And that dynasty was called the Fatimid dynasty because Fatima, they were Shiites, and Fatima is the daughter of Muhammad. That's why they use that title, that name, excuse me. The bottom line of this is the Shiites see that Ali was murdered, the caliphate was stolen by first the Umayyads, and later by the Abbasids, who overthrow the Umayyads. And they say the true leaders of Islam are the imams, their imams. Now, to them, an imam is a special person. And their last imam disappeared in a cave, and he's supposed to come out eventually at the end of days.
Imam is essentially the same thing as a priest or a rabbi, but
no, that's what I'm just about to explain this.
That's what I wanted to understand, right?
All right, now it's very simple. Same word, different meaning completely. Okay, the word imam comes from the Arabic word in front. In other words, in front of.
Okay.
Divan in French, lifneh in Hebrew, amama in Arabic, amma. So imam comes from that root. All right. The imam in the Sunni world is the man who leads the prayer, not the prayer caller who's in the he's up in the mosque now. Today they have a record, of course. He's in the minaret, but today they have a record. It's a man who stands in front and and leads the prayers and then preaches. That's the imam in the Sunni world. In the Shia world, there are no imams today alive. I mean, the imams that are going to come the end of days, maybe now, and you have the leader has a different title. Is the Ayatollah comes from the Arabic word ayat, which is Hebrew ot, a sign of God. Ayatollah, he's a sign of God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his title. There's no such thing. The imams in the Shia world are the direct descendants of Ali who no longer are around.
So they're not simply a rabbi, but they're like more like almost practically disciple level, or not like a priest, but like more of like a higher level than just a.
Yeah, they were like you could say like the best, or for 7 generations. And then
what do you mean by the best?
Baal Shem Tov.
Oh, you're saying like leading rabbinic authority or leading priest, or let's say a saint.
Mystical.
I'm just trying to find a parallel in Christianity or Judaism so people can better understand.
You have some of the stuff in Christianity. Well, is
that like a saint? Would you say that's more like a saint?
The Rebbe, I like maybe Lahavdil Lubavitch a little bit, the special person. In Christianity, I think like Saint Teresa had followers that were very special, or maybe Saint Benedict, Benedictine, Saint Benedict, or Dominican Saint Dominic, these or Saint Francis, even there with the animals and everything. This is the kind of thing you have here.
So that would be like a
very
special, or let's say in Catholicism, like a bishop. Is that what an imam would be?
No. I'm talking about people of special orders, the orders of monks and nuns. These are people who are they're not in the regular church. They're special. God gave them unique qualities.
As opposed to like a mullah, who's more like a priest or
a mullah. A mullah is a preacher, but it also could be an ayatollah, which because he is very holy, is a lahavdil. Like Ramatasyoz.
Lahavdil means to distinguish.
That he just died yesterday or Tuesday. Anyway, so the bottom line is these are people in Shia world who are these unique individuals who have this blood link to Muhammad through his daughter.
And Sunni don't recognize them on the same level?
No, not at all. They're pretenders.
Oh, they consider them. So why do they reject it? What's the philosophy for them to reject the blood lineage to Muhammad or
because all right, when Muhammad started to preach, this is going to take 5 minutes.
That's fine.
All right. When Muhammad started to preach, he was the ruling clique, if you want to call them that, the ruling group in Mecca were the Quraysh. And the Quraysh actually had a great business going. They had, I think I explained this already on this show. Anyway, they had 4 tribes, and there was a month, Dhul Hijjah, when people came in. That's where the word Hajj comes from. Hijj means requirement. They came in and one group of these Quraysh sold idols. Another group had the keys to the Kaaba where they worshipped. Another group controlled parking rights, tenting rights, where you lay your tent, you had to pay. And then another group had water, controlled the water supply. So these Quraysh are running the town. What happens is that they don't like Muhammad. Initially, they have big problems with Muhammad. And Muhammad finally leaves in 622. It's called the Hijra, which means literally in Arabic to flee, to run away. So he ran and he went to, as we said, to Yathrib, which comes to Medina, as we said before. Now, Muhammad in 628 has a big army already, and he's already defeated the Meccans in 2 battles, Battle of Badr and Uhud, the mountain, and he now comes back and he conquers the city. But after he dies, and the Quraysh accept him, the Quraysh, who were the leaders of that city, begin to reassert themselves within the framework of Islam. They do this. Abu Bakr, the first caliph, and Umar, the second caliph, were not. But Uthman, when Umar was murdered in a mosque in 644, and there was Umar did not, he knew there were 2, we would call them in modern terms, of political groups. They would not say this many Muslims, but this is the way a Westerner would call it. And you have these 2 groups. One is the Al-Bayt, which means the family of Muhammad, the supporters of Ali. They supported him. Then you have the Quraysh, which is the old clique, so to speak. So what happens is Umar makes a board to have an election for a caliph. And the board got 6 people on it, but he appoints 6 names, including Uthman, who will be the caliph, the 3rd caliph, and Ali, who will be the 4th caliph. And what occurs is that 2 of the electors on this board are out of town on missions. Excuse me. Talha and Zubair. I believe it was Talha who comes first, back first. And he asked Talha, whom would you select? So he said, I would choose Uthman. So they all scream out, Uthman is caliph, he's the caliph. Then, yeah, right, I think it's that way. All right. Then Zubair comes back and he says, I would have chosen Ali. So Ali's supporters are very disgruntled and they're very upset. In 656, after the pilgrimage, they all repair.
Pilgrimage to Mecca.
Right, I'm sorry, of course, to Mecca. They all repair to Medina. Uthman commands armies of tens of thousands. But in Medina, he's got 50, 100 guys. And there are thousands of people who are yelling for Ali. An altercation erupts. And the outcome is obvious. The 50 men are overpowered and killed. Supposedly, this happens. No one's ever made a movie of this because if they did, the Muslims would kill them. And I'm not making it as a joke. I mean, literally, excuse me. But it is a scene that Hollywood would love. They break into the room, and the leader of the guys breaking into the room is the son of a former caliph, Abu Bakr. And in the room is Uthman, who's holding the Quran that's now been written down. He ordered the codification of the Quran, which a lot of people did not like. Why they didn't like it? It's very simple, because if someone comes in and says, I heard the prophet say this, and someone says, I heard the prophet say that, whoever you listen to, the other one says, you're wrong, I hate you. You get it?
It causes division.
Right. And there are 3 versions of Quran today, by the way. All right. Anyway, those divisions would.
So let's go back to this Hollywood scene. So now he's holding this codified Quran.
They're in the room. Listen.
And who is this? Who's in the room here? This is the guy
the Caliph Uthman.
Okay.
and his wife Naila, Christian wife.
Okay.
All right. So he gets up, he gets up like this, and he holds up Quranic sheaves like this, Who dares approach the successor to the prophet of God when he holds the holy words of God in front of him? And the guys stop dead. And then this guy, Abdurrahman, he takes a sword and right through the Quran, into him.
Wow.
And the others start hacking away.
Wow.
Wait, listen to this. So then his Christian wife is screaming, Sahibi, my master, Sahibi, Sahibi. And she puts her hand out and they slice off 2 fingers from her hand. They kill Uthman. They bury him in a dog cemetery. He's later reburied. That, of course, is humongous insult.
Mm-hmm.
And they proclaim Ali Caliph. Now, one of the retainers who didn't die picks up his bloody scarf, Uthman's bloody scarf, wraps the 2 fingers in it, sneaks out of town, and goes to Damascus, where Uthman's kinsman, Muawiyah, who will become the next caliph, is in charge. He hangs it up in the mosque, and he tells everyone, you swear we will avenge the murder of the Caliph Uthman. And he raises an army. Ali raises an army. And there's a big fight. That's called the first fitna or disturbance or civil war, whatever way you want to translate it. Now, what happens is that in that battle, the Battle of Sufain, it's called, which means the double swords. Saif in Hebrew. Saif is Arabic. Sufain is the duel. In Arabic, you don't only have, in Hebrew, for half a dozen words. You have every word you can use a dual form in Arabic. So Sufain means 2 swords. So they have this battle. In the middle of the battle, Muawiyah is losing the battle. So he turns, his advisor is a general who had conquered Egypt. He says, listen, you got to stop this. We're going to get massacred. See, he says, tell the men to put on their spears sheaves of the Quran and call out, it's not right to spill brother's blood. You don't spill Muslims' blood. Brother Muslims shouldn't spill each other's blood. So that happens. Ali tells him to stop fighting. Big mistake from his point of view. Then he agrees to something else, an arbitration. Now, you are a lawyer, you know very well, once you agree to arbitration, already the guy who is out is now being recognized with rights. The next year, they meet at Ad-Ruh. That's where they have the arbitration. Now, I'm telling you, Hollywood could really listen to this one. So, Ali chooses a very old and devout Muslim as his representative. Muawiyah,
who's arbitrating this?
They're going to arbitrate.
How do they figure out? Because who the arbitrator is everything.
Ali chose an old man who was supposed to be very respected, and Muawiyah chooses this crafty general.
Okay.
The crafty general.
They're to arbitrate, or they're the attorneys.
They're going to discuss it and arbitrate it. The 2 of them. Listen to what happens.
Go ahead.
They go into a tent, and the Amra, the general, Amr ibn Alas, he says, look, Abu Musa, you're very religious. You know, in truth, Ali shouldn't be caliph because the way this happened, in blood. Of course, we know Muawiyah shouldn't be caliph. So let's depose both of them, and then we'll find a new caliph. That's in the tent. So Abu Musa, whatever reasons, agrees. So they come out now, and Amr puts his arm, I think, I don't know, in Hollywood he surely would, around Abu Musa. Abu Musa, you are older, Wakur, you speak. Abu Musa gets up. He goes, "We have decided to depose the two caliphs." So Amr looks at Abu Musa in total shock. He goes, "Abu Musa, don't you remember we both agreed to depose Ali and declare Muawiyah Caliph?" Yeah. Bang.
He stabs him.
They break off. They don't fight. Ali goes to Kufa, where he had relocated. It's in Iraq.
How do people know? Go on.
What?
How do people know what happened in the tent versus what?
Well, that's what Abu Musa said happened in the tent.
Okay, fine.
All right. I assume.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Muawiyah goes off to Damascus. Now.
So what comes out of this though? So what did
Nothing
Abu Musa
yet. Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
Ali claims to be Caliph now for another 2 years. Meanwhile, there are a group of people who really, really want Ali to go to war, and he doesn't want to fight. I don't know why. The sources don't explain why, but they say he refused to fight. These people make such a tumult and threaten him that he has to go fight. So he tells them, "Get lost, leave Kufa." They go outside of town and they start rumbling, and he's afraid of them. Now he's afraid of them. So he tells them, "If you're not gone in whatever it was, I forget, a week, 3 days, whatever, I'm going to kill you. Get lost." Now, rule 1 over there should be, I don't think Ali was so swift, but I shouldn't say that. I'm not saying that. I take it back. I certainly was swift. I'm not insulting Ali. Shiites would kill me for this. Not, God forbid. No, Ali was a very smart man. Maybe he had other reasons. He must have had something reason for this. So I don't know why. Okay. So now what happened? After whatever the time limit was, half of them leave and half of them stay. And Ali massacres the supposedly 3,000 who stay. Now, the others go off. I mean, I could tell you where probably, but I think for a minute, but it doesn't matter. According to the sources, this is what happens next. There is a very beautiful young woman who has 3 suitors. And she says to number 1, "You want to marry me? Bring me the head of Ali." In other words, kill Ali. Remember, he killed all those people. To number 2, "You want to marry me? Bring me the head of Muawiyah." And number 3, "Bring me the head of Amr al-Abbas," because Amr ibn al-As is the general who set this whole thing up. He's ruling in Egypt. What happens next? And the man who kills Ali is Ibn al-Jam. We'll get to him last. One of them goes to Damascus to kill Muawiyah. Muawiyah knows that Umar was murdered in the mosque, so under his robes he wears chain mail. The guy attacks him with a knife, and he doesn't get seriously injured because he's wearing a mail underneath. And of course, the assailant is dispatched. The next assailant goes to Fustat, Old Cairo, where Amr is. And that day, Amr is ill. And one of the commanders of one of his guards units, a friend of his, goes dressed like him, and he dies in Amr's place.
A body double?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Go on.
And Ali is neither lucky nor smart in the sense of
in this instance, in this moment, right?
In this moment, right?
He's obviously very smart.
He is very smart, absolutely.
Right.
But in this moment, he makes an error, and he doesn't wear a mail, and Ibn al-Jan murders him. And as he's dying, he says, kill him if I die. And of course he dies, he's killed. Now, what happens? When Muawiyah hears that Ali is dead, his followers proclaim him Caliph, and he's the first Caliph of the Umayyad dynasty. The Shia, or the party of Ali, recognize Hassan, the eldest son of Ali, as the Caliph, or as not as really a Caliph, but as the Imam, the leader. He is poisoned by one of his wives. The Sunnis will tell you that she poisoned him because he was a terrible husband, and the Shia will say that the Sunnis hired her to kill him. And the Shia will say he was hired to kill him. He's succeeded by his brother Hassan Hussein, and Hussein will basically make a protest when Muawiyah dies. And Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, sends a governor, Ubdalyahu, and there is a confrontation. And they say there were 400 supporters of Hussein, and they are all killed, except the child who escapes the Imam becomes the Imam. And that is the difference. The Shia accept that, and they don't, and they totally reject the Sunni caliphs.
Got it. Okay.
It goes back to the 7th century.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So, and that, as far as where they end up settling, so the
Mosul, well, the Shia are in Iraq, but the Iranians are very mystical people generally, and Shia Islam spreads in Iran. Iran is a Shia state. It's the main Shia state, and areas in parts of Iraq also near where all this stuff happened. They are also Shia. There are areas,
and the Saudis are Sunni.
Saudis, of course, they're Wahhabi Sunni. Ooh. Rara Sunni, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
So okay, all right. It's 11:45. I'm gonna get some super chats, and then I'm gonna send you on your way, Dad. All right.
All right.
So Brian says yes, thank you. I'm not sure what I was referring to. Cable says, want to see oppression? Go to the Middle East and see how different religious sects treat each other. In Iraq, Sunni ruled, and Shia Christians and Kurds were treated like second-class.
Absolutely,
citizens.
100%.
Yeah. Crusader Saracen says, how did we go from Ottoman Sultan rescuing 100,000 Jews from Spain with his fleet to Muslim-Jewish relations today? Apologies if it's a broad question.
There's a lot here. All right. The Ottomans during that period.
When was that? That was during the Inquisition?
Well, that was the Inquisition of Spain when there was the expulsion.
That's what I'm saying. Is that when the Sultan?
Was, the edict, the Alhambra edict in July of 1492.
I didn't know that the Ottoman Sultan saved 100,000 Jews.
A lot of them were saved. Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be Bayezid was the Sultan then. Anyway, Bayezid II. So anyway, yes, he sent a fleet to save the Jews because he felt the Jews would be valuable. And there was no reason to persecute the Jews. The Jews will come, they will populate the empire, and they'll be productive. And he has nothing against the Jews. They're second-class citizens, of course, obviously, because in fact, they established under Suleiman, I think it was Suleiman, I am not sure, they established the position of Hacham Bashi, which means Hacham is a rabbi, Bashi is chief in Turkish, head rabbi. And they had that in the Ottoman Empire, the same way they had the chief priest of the Greek Orthodox in the Ottoman Empire. An interesting story on this, and then I'll try to answer the rest of it. That is that there was a lady who's been called the Murano princess or queen, was Dona Gracia de Mendes. She married Fernando de Mendes in Portugal, and he's had a spice empire. He was a Murano, and she fled. Ultimately, she went to Holland, and this is before Holland is really independent, but the Spanish control there is limited. And then she ends up going to Venice, Venice, and she's in prison. And Venice had all these trading entrepôts in the Middle East. And Suleiman, known as the Magnificent in the West, as the lawgiver in the Turkish Empire, Suleiman sends a message: if you don't want us closing down all your shops, you better release that woman. So they send her to Constantinople, and he welcomes her. He said, they're so stupid to mistreat you. You're the wealthiest woman in Europe. Well, she wasn't. Elizabeth I had more money, but otherwise she was. She rebuilt Tveria. And any of you who get to Israel, you should go to the Donna Grazia Hotel. You'll see a
Tiberias.
whole life there. In Tveria. Right, Tiberias. I'm sorry. Tiberias. Now, so what happened? First of all, the Ottoman Empire becomes more corrupt. The Ottoman Empire begins to fall apart. And there were, during the First World War, when the Ottoman Empire is really tottering, there were a number of Jews who were hung because they were working against the government. They wanted the Ottomans to lose, because they figure if the Brits win, that things will be better for the Jews. Now, maybe a Jewish state eventually. And that was even before the Balfour Declaration, which was in November of 17.
Hmm. Okay.
All right, that's a short answer. There's much more, but that's a short answer.
Okay. I got this one. Worcestershire says, one hour behind. I have you 1.5 speed. Thank heaven for you both. I find this topic triggering. You're both very strong. Morim kamocha lo kalim. So that's
Thank you.
That's a very big compliment. She's that's
you so
Hebrew
much.
for teachers like you are not easy to find. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that very generous compliment.
Yeah. Crusader Saracen says, as a Christian reading about Khalid ibn Walid.
Oh, yeah.
How the Romans were crushed along with the Sassanids. I can't help but wonder if God really did favor the Muslims, if only for a time.
Well, now, if you want, I'll give you some reasons why this happened. Okay. So you obviously calling them the Romans. They call themselves the Romans. We call them the Byzantines. There's the Eastern Roman Empire. That's all that's left now. There was a 20-year war between the Sasanian Persians and the Byzantines.
When is this?
This was ended around 628. It's about 608 to 28. Okay. Heraclius was the commander was the emperor, and the Persians were finally defeated. The Persians at one point occupied Jerusalem and took pieces of what was supposedly the true cross on which he was, crucified, away. So I use a parable on this. I would say if you have two first-class prize fighters and they go for 20 rounds after each other, and both of them are exhausted, and then in comes a highly motivated new force, logically that new force is going to have a chance. That was one. Two, this Khalid ibn al-Walid was a brilliant commander, and they had another one, Salih ibn Abi Waqqas, who was also brilliant. I'll give you an example of that. Muhammad said you have to give warning before you attack, 3-day warning. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas sends to the governor of nearby province. The governor was called Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if it's named for him or not, but sources say his name was Hormuz. So Hormuz is having a party, and these 3 guys come in from the desert, and they come and they break into the party, and they go to Hormuz. You have 3 days to surrender. So Hormuz is laughing and laughing, and he goes to one of the slaves, go out to the garden, take a shovel, and dig up a shovel full of dirt. So go out to the garden. Slave, ostensibly, and picks up a shovel of dirt. He says, give them that. Tell them that's all they'll see of Persia. So this is not Khalid. This was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. So 3 guys come back, and they hand him the dirt. He gets up in front of the entire army. God has given us Persia. Look! And they go, and they conquer Persia. It's only that Hormuz is involved in the murder of the second Caliph Umar, indirectly. Well, directly. I can tell you another. That's another story. But anyway, so that was one thing. The Arabs had very good commanders: Khalid, Saad, and also Amr, the one who conquers Egypt. Those are great commanders. There's another thing also. There's one of the documents says that when they conquered Ctesiphon, that's the capital of Persia, they come in there and there's tons of booty. You got to understand, these are guys from the desert. They're very, what we would call provincial in English, not sophisticated. So one guy, after the fighting is over, turns to another. He says, "That gorgeous young woman you got, what did you do with her?" "I sold her." "How much did you get for her?" He goes, "I got 1,000 silver dirhams." And he looks and he says, "You fool, you sold her for so little." He says, "What do you mean? There's no number bigger than 1,000.
That's fine.
It's almost like a child in a toy store would take whatever you want.
Drop Barracuda says, "Just want to say thank you for sharing your profound knowledge on these topics. Your ability to blend wisdom with engaging narratives is truly a gift." Thank you so much, Drop.
Thank you so much.
And finally, cult follower number 6, Joseph, says, "Thank you, great Lawgic. You should narrate books. Please come back and do this again." Let me just make sure. Let me just check on locals because I haven't really been in there since I restarted my computer. Make sure I didn't miss anything there. It's very possible that I did. So let me just make sure that I'm good there. And just a trigger of us. Thank you for the tip. You're much appreciated, my brother. All right, I'm going to wrap this up over here. And thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
I love when you come by here. You always have like just amazing background and wealth of knowledge about this topic, and the stories are just crazy. And I always have to review afterwards because I feel like I missed certain parts. So anyway, that's our show.
I'm telling you, they can't make a movie because of what would happen.
Yeah.
There was a movie made. There was a religious Muslim who made a movie. It was called The Messenger. And they seized black Muslims, seized the Hillel house in Washington and forced them to close the movie down.
Yeah,
and they never showed Muhammad. The camera was Muhammad.
All right.
They never showed him even. That's sacrilege. And they say that anyone who makes a movie about the Christians, the beginning of Christianity, or anyone who makes a movie about our Bible, shows that we don't really believe in it and we don't honor it enough and we're not respectful. That's how they look at it.
That's a Muslim perspective about.
That's a Muslim perspective on that. Yes.
Interesting.
That's why I have to be very careful.
Yeah, I reviewed a few movies on locals which were portraying either Exodus or the Binding of Isaac, and it is weird to me because growing up, they never like any sort of like comics or stuff like that or images that they would show. They almost would avoid showing like any faces of like the patriarchs or Moses. It sort of would just be like a shadowy figure type of thing, which I always assumed was designed to display like respect. Like we're not going to try and share that image, which is something that Muslims take very seriously. And I think you rarely see that type of perspective from what I've seen in Christianity. Now you're more likely to see portrayals, but when I see portrayals in movies, my first thought is it's so weird to try and associate a face with Abraham or Charlton Heston, obviously famously portraying Moses in the Ten Commandments, but it sort of becomes like, yeah, that's what Moses looked like. He looked like Charlton Heston. That's sort of like when it gets implanted that way. I can understand the Muslim perspective of saying like it's sort of diminishing the individual by trying to portray an image of that individual, because now you almost feel like you're capturing that person, or you have a grip about what that person is on some level. And so I can understand the philosophy, only because, like, in my youth, I always felt like you shouldn't be drawing a picture of any of these, the historic greats of the religion.
When I made a PowerPoint on this, and I actually found an image, I believe, from an Arabic film about Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was the guy that conquered Persia at the beginning of the conquest of Persia. That's the one with the shovel. So, I mean, I saw an actor, but Muhammad for sure not. Ali, I'm sure not. In fact, now in the Western Islam, the Sunni, you don't see pictures of people. In Iran, there are pictures. That's the difference also with the Shia. But when they picture Ali or Muhammad, they're veiled.
Right.
They're veiled.
And by the way, Long Black Train here makes a comment. We mimic to honor, not only to derive, which I think he means deride over here. And I agree with you. I'm positive that, for example, in the movie Last Temptation of Christ, that was not designed in any way to trivialize Jesus. I think that it's meant to honor. My point is that it is a cultural distinction as to what's considered honoring. Is it more considered honoring by not showing versus displaying a face, which they'll invariably take a handsome individual or someone who's going to, they invariably they're not going to have some grotesque figure playing any of these roles, whether in any of these capacities, irrespective of what any of these gentlemen actually look like. But my point is, it's a different take of philosophy as to what is considered honoring. Is it more considered honoring to put up some handsome figure or some aesthetically pleasing image, or is it considered a higher form of honoring to say we're not even going to try and find some image which is appropriate? And I'm not saying that I don't think that you can say that this approach is right and that approach is wrong. I'm simply saying it's philosophically a difference in cultures as to what's considered greater honor, because each of the people who are portraying invariably are trying to honor. That's the objective, is to honor. So I don't look at it as an intent to deride. I'm saying it's simply it's an interesting distinction in and how honoring is manifested.
I would like to, before we close, I want to say something I think important. To try to understand, first of all, the mindset of these people is very different than Western mindset. People say that the Jews and the Christians can live in peace if they accept the status of dhimmi or subject peoples. If they rebel, and the condition of being a dhimmi and not being attacked is to accept the subservient status. And if you rebel and assert your authority, or you don't pay your taxes, then the Muslims have the right to take you out, which is a nice way of saying, you know what, eliminate you. And I think that is the attitude of Iran, and that is the attitude of Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the other proxies. I also think that, though, however, and we talked about this on this show before, there is a thing which is called Islamofascism, which I discussed extensively. I showed a film here for you, I don't know when,
2 years ago,
a year ago, 2 years ago.
It was more than a year.
Anyway, yeah. But the bottom line is, though, do understand there's a wake-up call here for everybody, and we have to be aware of what's here and Islam is a militant religion, and Islam is what Islam is. It's a militant religion. There are Muslims, such as my wonderful lady that works here, who are not militant, and there are Muslims who are militant.
Not even remotely militant.
I think that part of whether they're militant or not depends on their upbringing, on their psychology, their own personal psychology, their personal experiences, the way they view life, what they were taught. And in the case of many of the Palestinians, as I said before, grandma, daddy, grandma, grandpa, great grandpa, all the way back, no, they stole, we have to get them because what they took for us, and blood for blood. And that's, I think, how they're raised. And that's why those little kids do this stuff. And The problem is that the people in the West don't get it. They don't understand. And if an Israeli soldier shoots a kid, you can be darn sure that it's because that kid is a real threat, a significant threat. I really believe that.
Well, I also think that a large part of that whole statistic about kids is basically, I think I believe they count kids up to like the age of 19 or 20.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm
talking about when it's a genuinely
real
small
incident
child.
where we know
Right.
that happened. They were kids. No,
Right.
well, you're right. Oh, the numbers, yes. Remember, of those killed, at least 30% or more likely, much more, were Hamas or were shooting at them or tried to fire missiles or doing something.
Let me just, there were a couple
chats put in front of them as a human shield.
There's a couple of chats I just want to finish with. Tech Crisis says, thanks to the history lesson, still lost, but hopefully some of it will stick. It is difficult to
play it over, replay it. You can.
Yeah. Fan says, can we get our Muslim friend from Dearborn back on the show, Joe? We'll see. I was talking to him about a while ago, like much closer to October 7th, about the idea. He's talking about Hassan Shami. And I still have a healthy relationship with him. Like, I have no animus towards him. He doesn't have any personal animus towards me, as far as I know. We had talks about it. I haven't spoken with him in the last month or so. I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna happen. Both of us have both Hassan and I have concerns about doing
I have a concern. One of the reasons, and I want to word this a certain way because I do not want to be misquoted. Like if someone were to turn to me, not on a show, and say, well, Gaza is an open air prison. So I would respond, the jailers are Hamas. Right. I purposely put it this way now, because in a debate, I might say, well, yeah, I might say, I don't want to say it because I'm afraid someone will take me and they can swing it around. You know, what you can do with images and voice recordings today is, yeah, it's an open air, but that, you know, but who's the jailer?
For a clip you.
Yeah, and I can be changed around what I say. So
right. The intent to your message can be perverted, is what you're
right. Exactly.
By a bad actor. So
I'm not saying he would do it. I'm saying others would do it.
Right. Fanzo says, did the Jews take great offense in images of Moses or Abraham? No, I don't think there's any offense taken. It's just a matter that when Jews themselves are doing it, they
right. I think sometimes we laugh.
Yeah.
Like Moses with horns.
Right. Yeah. Crusader Saracen says, fun fact, the last Sassanid Shah who was expelled by the Muslims died as a general in Tang, China. Okay.
Okay.
Drop Barracuda says, Ahmed, Texas didn't handle this maturely. I'm not sure what he's referring to on that. Cult follow Joseph says, honoring isn't the issue, Joe. It's how one contends with the offense. Christ is often dishonored. Christians are often offended. Other faiths, yeah, that's true. It's not a matter of how you feel. It's how you actually respond. That's 100% true in the vast majority of situations. And the final one here from Pam Ronnie, she says, can Dad close with a prayer? Do you want to? That's a request from Pam.
All right.
And I'm going to close with this instead of my regular whole end sign off. I'm gonna let you close with a prayer, Dad.
May there be peace in the world without destroying democracy and without oppressing people.
Amen. Godspeed. Thank you for joining.
All the best.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.